2 times total points at grocery stores? Your same kitchen can come with more cuisines. Sapphire Preferred from Chase. Make more of what's yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LA Times Talks at the Sundance Film Festival. I'm Mark Olson. I write about movies for the Times, and we're here today to talk about the movie Together Together, which is premiering as part of the U.S. Dramatic Competition at the festival. And so we're joined by the writer and director, Nicole Beckwith, and the 2 stars of the film, Patty Harrison and Ed Helms. Thanks to all of you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
And now, Nicole, I think maybe this will be slightly less awkward if you do it than if I try and do it. Could you just describe the movie? What is the story of Together Together?
The story is about a young loner, Anna, who is hired as the gestational surrogate for Matt, a man in his 40s who is on the track to become a single father, and just about their relationship from the moment they first meet in the job interview until the baby's first breath. So it's this contained just journey on what that relationship is.
And Patty, what was it that struck you when you first read the screenplay?
I really felt that it feels weird saying it because they've heard me say this 10 billion times, but and it really subverted my expectations about what I thought the movie was going to be and what I anticipated it, from when I started reading the script to the end, and it subverted my expectations in a really delicate, funny, warm way. And it was just so exciting and different than anything I'd kind of read before. It was just super exciting. It felt like it kind of danced between all these different tones and genres. It was just a cool, oh wow, this thing is kind of talking about some of the apprehensions or apprehensions that I had about the movie. Good job, Nicole.
And the same question for you, Ed. What struck you when you first read the script?
I was like, how much cash are they going to pony up for me here? And that's why I do independent movies. So I read this script pretty much in a void. I didn't have much context for it, and I maybe knew the log line or basic description, but it carries with it. I think the basic description carries with it a lot of implications and very easy assumptions, and I certainly brought those to my first reading of the script, and was extremely and very pleasantly surprised by the actual twists and turns of the script, none of which fit my expectations, and all of which delighted me enormously. And I just felt like, it was tonally an area that I don't get to play in very often. Not a lot of directors approach me for this kind of material, and so I felt very very grateful for the opportunity and really excited to jump in.
And now, Nicole, I'm sort of purposefully stepping on a landmine here by asking you this question. Do you consider the movie a romantic comedy?
I guess so, but not by the standards of what we know as a romantic comedy. I think that the relationship between Matt and Anna isn't what we see as romantic, but I do think that there is a lot of romance in falling in friend love, just as much as there's romance falling in any other kind of love. I think you're nervous, you feel a little lighter, all of those things that we attribute to falling in love apply to whatever kind of love we fall in.
Because did you purposely want to explore a relationship that doesn't become romantic, that stays sort of a friend relationship, and yet still we see it go through ups and downs, we see it deepen? Like, what was it that made you want to explore this sort of other kind of relationship?
I think culturally we're like obsessed with like love stories and romantic love and happily ever after. And I think we fall in so many different kinds of love over the course of a life. But, you know, in the movie space or TV space, we generally are only celebrating one. And I really did want to, I was hungry for a story that showed that and explored that. And yeah, and I think that it's important. I also, you know, I mean, I mention it in the movie. I guess I like hate Woody Allen movies, but I do think that like the dynamic, which we've come so accustomed to, like an older man and a younger woman, is like that's the bread and butter of romance and like a large part of the landscape. And I do think that that pairing, they have a lot to offer each other, but it doesn't have to be sexualized, and it doesn't have to be, you know, based on romance or physicality or like how attracted anyone is to each other. It can be about something deeper.
Because Ed, was this a difficult register to play in, the idea of portraying not like a romantic love, but to portray this friendship love? Seems like it would be sort of like a difficult nuance to achieve.
I don't think so, and I kind of disagree with that assumption, because what I think is so cool about this story is that it's tapping into something that really is so familiar to all of us anyway, which is some form of, like all of the various forms of love that we experience in our lives. It's just not a story that's told very often or very well. You know, we're very familiar with bromances as a kind of movie genre. They're usually bawdy comedies, and I've certainly been in my share of those. But this is certainly an area for me narratively that is new, but it is not an area sort of experientially as a human that's new. I mean, it is in some ways. There's some of the specifics of it, but I think that friend love, and even that's too simple. Like there are so many nuances and complications to all of the forms of love that we experience in our lives, and I think that was something that I felt really sort of ready to tap into and refreshed by the opportunity to tap into, because I don't get to do it very often.
And Patty, how did you feel about the movie's kind of, you know, look at these different kind of relationships that we don't see often portrayed in movies?
I mean, it was exciting. It's very, it just felt like a very specific and rare point of view, and like a kind of this super delicate, like attention to detail that Nicole is like a surgeon about. Like, I think it's, we've seen 10 billion rom-coms. We've seen 10 billion movies of like the younger girl and like the older man, and that like, but he loves her soul. He loves her soul and not her like little perky titties. And as much as I pushed that, I really wanted to show my breasts in this film. Nicole was like, no. And so that was a legal fight we fought for like years on, and then finally she won. So my cut of the movie comes out in 2050. No, it was like handled in such a interesting, intelligent way. Like Nicole's so smart and like so witty, and getting to like become friends through this movie it's so interesting to be like close with Nicole now, and then like watch the movie and see kind of like knowing the the way the little machines in her mind work, and like them appearing in the movie, and like the way the characters are talking to each other. And it's just like feels really special. It feels like it's, you know, having a more detailed, challenging conversation that you don't see as often.
Because Nicole, the details of their relationship, this single man who's, you know, going to become a father, his pregnancy surrogate, like these are just sort of characters we really don't see. And so certainly it's a relationship we don't really see, but the details of who they both are, like, did you do a lot of research into pregnancy and surrogacy? Like, how did you sort of come to get those sort of details that Patty's talking about?
I did talk to a surrogate as I was writing the movie, but she was also married and had children of her own, so it was a very different scenario. But I just wanted to make sure I was like, you know, grounded in the right experience. And I did actually do like a lot of thinking. I mean, I think I like wrote these like weird essays, one about Matt for Ed and one about Anna for Patty, that had a lot of backstory and a lot of details, just like what they used to play on the playground, what high school was like. That wasn't in the script ever. It wasn't ever anything that I was like putting in the film, but I thought it was just nice to have that. And for the character of Anna, who as a teenager had a pregnancy that kind of derailed her life, I did actually do a bunch of research about the state that I believed her to be from, a lot of their rules, like what the Planned Parenthood situation was during those years and what the rules were. And she gives that child up for adoption. And so I like called adoption agencies and like talked through what all of those steps would be like, just to have the details that I think are important to bringing a character to life, even if they're not in the script.
Because there's a fantastic moment in the movie when like a salesperson sort of responds very differently to Anna and Matt, like if to the idea that if Anna were a single mother, there'd be something sad about it, but Matt being a single father, there's something really sweet about it. And Nicole, did you definitely want to explore that gap, like the way in which sort of like expectations can be different, you know, of what people think of men and women and people's different situations?
For sure. I mean, I think it's like that's in the same neighborhood as like, you know, a dad picks up their kid from school one time and everyone's like, oh my God, what an amazing father. He came and picked them up. But meanwhile, the mom is like picking up the kids and going to soccer practice and making 1,000 sandwiches like 364 days out of the year or whatever. And it's just like she's never doing enough. And so I do think that there is something something about that. And I did want to kind of shine a little light on that. And I think too, it's important to tell a story about like a single straight guy who really wants to be a dad and is taking that into his own hands and moving forward with his life. It's a kind of story we tell all the time about women. It's like women will do whatever it takes to become a mom, like no holds bar and buck convention, and just like it's their driving force. And we like understand that. And we are just like, yeah, that makes sense. Like girls want to be moms. But we never tell that story. And, you know, men want to be fathers too. So I wanted to get into that male biological clock.
And Ed, did you appreciate that aspect of the story? Now, one thing that I like so much about the character and about your performance is that he seems like an essentially good person, and yet at the same time, the movie doesn't shy away from showing him, you know, at times maybe thinking of himself over Anna, fumbling as far as like how to behave. Like the movie is very honest about who he is and mistakes he might be making, even if he's essentially, you know, a nice guy and a good person. Is that something that you liked about the character as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like a lot of, I mean, this character, to be clear, is very different than just about anything else I've tried. Although it does have similarities, and one of those is that I am drawn to characters who are well-intentioned but getting in their own way because of some personal flaw. and in large part because I feel that way in life. I feel well-intentioned, and that I also screw up a lot, and I'm confused about why. And so when I get to see in scripts, and obvious blind spots for characters, it's a little bit cathartic for me to kind of act that out, because I'd be like, I'm not really like this guy. Like I would never see this. I don't have this character's blind spot, but it sure is fun to play. But then, of course, in my life, I have so many blind spots. But so I think that's a very poignant story, just about any kind of character who wants to do right. And sometimes even the most well-intentioned, or sort of, that the concept of a good guy, I feel like is so reductive, because people are complicated and oftentimes fumble or hurt other people in ways that feel inconsistent with even their own view of themselves or their own moral compass. And so I love any story that kind of can tap into some of that and show some of that.
And is this idea of the male biological clock, is that something you recognized in yourself at all?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a relatively I'm a father of a young daughter, and I guess by the sort of average, I'm a little bit later to that, but so I relate to that feeling a little bit.
And now, Patty, this is your first lead role in a movie, and what did it mean to you to get this part in particular?
I do want to point out that I did play Godzilla in Godzilla 2000. So that's an inaccuracy. If you just want to go back and edit that, so you don't embarrass yourself. But I didn't know this was this was, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Get it together. Come on, Harrison. It's the big leagues. It's Sundance.
Right. Ed has just been texting me for like 2.5 hours saying, stop. So thank you for always being my accountability
Don't
coach,
be
Ed.
yourself. Be something different. Be what America wants you to be.
Yes. And I will do that right now. I never ever thought I'd get an opportunity like this. And it was really, I think I was skeptical for a little bit. And, I really basically put, I'm transgender. It's just I never would have thought that I'd be playing a pregnant woman and as a lead actor, in a kind of more dramatic role. So, I did play pregnant in Godzilla 2000. If you remember the plot of that movie, I was pregnant because they find out Godzilla is actually female and lays eggs. I'm sure this is very relevant and resonates with everyone. I'm sure in lockdown, everyone has revisited Godzilla 2000. But I just really felt, I can't really explain the glaze. It was a weird hypersensitivity and also a dreaminess that wasn't just oh, it's dreamy. It was just so surreal. And it was a lot of weird pinching myself moments to be oh yeah, it was a lot of work. It's the most, I've ever worked consecutively. I was well, if you're a lead actor in a movie, you kind of gotta almost be in every scene, which I hated. And I really fought Nicole on, and I found a girl on the street who looked so close to me. And I was like, use her. I want to go to GameStop. She said, no. You got to be in it. So that was really frustrating. And the rest of the experience, though, was a dream. And I feel so lucky. I know that's like cliche, but I really feel like I think about it now. I think about like my hands and like touching my computer and it says like Sundance on it and there's Nicole and Ed, and it feels really surreal.
Because Nicole, you've said how you wanted to cast both Ed and Patty a little bit against type, slightly against their sort of typical screen personas, or their comedic personas. Why was that? And how do you feel like you were sort of like twisting the dial a little bit on who they are on screen?
Well, they're both like two performers that I'm just very, very drawn to. Ed doesn't even really know what a huge fan I am of him. I've been very quiet about how much of his work I've watched over and over again, but I can talk about it freely now that I tricked him into being in my movie. But even through his biggest, most comedic performances, there's like a vulnerability and a sensitivity and like a humanity in there that I always really clicked in with. And I just wanted more of that, pull that out, and get to spend time in there. And Patty, I saw, she's newer on the scene. I saw her Tonight Show spot, which is where most people became aware of her genius and brilliance. And there was just something about her. I was like, oh, look, there's Anna. And then I watched everything I could get my hands on of Patty and just became like a huge fan. And also still, like, you just see that little nugget of the humanity, the sensitivity, the depth behind all of the things that are very funny. Like, I think to be very funny, you do actually have to be like holding hands with all of the kind of darker, difficult things, the more sensitive things in the whole world. I think that's how you're funny. It's like that's a huge part of it. And I don't think the door swings both ways. I don't think that, like, every Oscar winner can pull out a comedically genius performance. But I do think that people who are really gifted at comedy have a deep relationship to just what it is to be a person. And so that's what kind of like drew me in that direction. And then, like, as a director, it's so fun to really get to make something new with people. And I felt like we all got to like journey into this thing, and we were all doing things that we hadn't done before. This is not the genre of my first film. It's very tonally different from my first film. So I was also doing something that, I hadn't done before. And it was just, really gratifying to be able to do that all together. Very special.
And now, Ed, Patty, how aware are you of the way that sort of Nicole is conceiving of you as performers and maybe trying to put this little twist on what you've done before? Like, Ed, do you feel like you are aware of what like an Ed Helms part is, so that you can put a little bit of different spin on it?
Yeah, I think I have at this point in my career, I have a reasonably good sense of the pigeonholes that I've been that I've either carved out for myself or been jammed into over the past couple of decades. But and I feel very lucky as an actor because I generally like the pigeonhole that I'm in. I think it's fun to play hapless, well-intentioned idiots. But that has evolved a lot now for me, and I now see a lot of the limitations of that opportunity, and creatively, it's not as I'm just eager to kind of spread my wings and do other things, and so I can't say that I was super aware of Nicole's intention to kind of put some English on the expectation of Ed Helms, but I just saw an opportunity to do something a little bit more kind of understated and real, and so many of my characters, like I have a running joke with a lot of directors that I work with that I need to do my Don Knotts take before I can even settle into like a normal level of goofy. Like I have to do a super goofy take. just to get it out of my system, because that's my initial instinct. This is like 10 notches below that. So usually it's like I do my Don Knotts take, then I do something that's usable by the director. In this case, it was like everything I did was so much smaller than that in such a great way. And there's so much beauty and excitement in smallness, in nuance. And I think these performances, I'm going to get real heady for a second, but acting can be sort of like fractals. Like the more you zero in on something, the more complex and beautiful it is. And so sometimes so much less is so much more. And that's something that I don't think anyone would accuse me of for most of my career, but I've certainly come to understand and appreciate so much more as I've matured as a performer. I'm not a mature person, but I have matured as a performer.
And Patty, did you feel like this part was different somehow from your like stand-up persona?
It was very different, and it was very intimidating, and just kind of like, I mean, the movie is very funny. Nicole is like an extremely, extremely funny person, but I think what people who are like, identify as like hard in the paint comedians or comedic actors probably have a harder time with is like being earnest and sincere. And Nicole doesn't have that problem. She's one of those annoying ass people who happens to be like incredibly in touch with like her heart and her brain, and the overlap of the Venn diagram of her heart and her brain are like almost complete beautiful circle with a glowing eclipse like ring around it, where she can say something to you that like is so debilitatingly funny, but also it just makes you cry so much. There's tears coming out of all your orifices, and that is something that is just like, it was very scary, but also like, I was coming out of shooting this show too. Shrill, that I play, the character that I play in that show is pretty absurd. Like it's really comedic, and they like have me ad lib, and it's just like a completely different character. And I came literally like a day out of shooting that into LA, like going into fittings and stuff, and then like going over things and then shooting. And there were a lot of like moments where like Ed Helms himself said, Don Knotts takes, real like me being like hamming it just because I'm like in this like mode. And then Nicole being so patient, so like, and she's so like smooth and just makes you feel comfortable and safe. And I think that is huge in being vulnerable, because it did require some like vulnerability that like I think at the time, I didn't realize how much in control Nicole was until I thought about it after. And then I was like, whoa, she's sick. She is in my head. She is changed. She's manipulating me. I want to be like, oh, Andy, I want to be doing the Don Knotts. Oh, Andy. Like, no, restraint. It's messed up. It's messed up.
Pull it back. Yeah.
I am never pulling it back after this movie. No way. No way.
And Nicole, you mentioned this earlier, but I want to be sure to ask you about it, that the opening credits of the movie are in sort of the classic Woody Allen style, the same font and the white type on black. And then about midway through the movie, Patty's character delivers this pretty lacerating monologue about Woody Allen movies, not just The Low-Hanging Fruit of Manhattan, but also goes right at Annie Hall as well, which fewer people do. And was this something that like you've had these thoughts and you just kind of wanted to use the movie as a vehicle to sort of get these ideas that you have out there? Or what was it? Why did you want to kind of include this sort of little moment about Woody Allen in the movie?
I mean, I do have those thoughts. I think
just be careful, Nicole. Just be careful, because I'm dating Woody Allen right now.
Oh, okay. I'll be Careful. While I was writing that writing that scene, because also, like, you know, in my appetite for this kind of story, I think like Woody Allen films love the older man and younger woman trope. It might be like the birthplace of that, you know, ideal. Uh, and so part of my hunger for this story is the deficit created by movies like that. And so while I was writing that scene, I was just like going for it. And as I was writing it, I was like, this movie will never get made. No, no one will ever make this movie with these lines in here. But they did. And I think, you know, everybody always is like, but Annie Hall. That's always thing. And it's like, yeah, there's some funny things and funny ideas in that movie, but ultimately that movie really is about exactly what is said in the film. And I have said before, and I'll say again, I think Woody Allen movies did for like romance what like internet porn did to sex. Kind of like really created this like strange extreme that is this like, you know, ideal thing that you think like this is how it is. This like old decrepit nebbishy guy who's an asshole is going to get these like beautiful young women who look to him for approval all the time on everything, and that's, you know, not true. But so yeah, I really did think while I was writing it, I was like, no one will make this movie. There's such reverence for those films. And I was very pleased that nobody asked me to take it out. I was kind of thinking there would be pushback, and there wasn't. But that's where the, you know, when you're watching the movie and you're thinking, oh, they're going to get together, they're going to get together. It's like that's where that idea comes from.
Patty, was that an exciting speech for you to deliver? Did you enjoy that scene?
Yeah, it's like one of the big moments in reading the script that made me want to do the movie. Was like when I was reading it, I had apprehensions about, you know, going into reading the script and you just get like the very simple like blurb about what it's about. It's like a young girl meets like older guy who wants to have a baby, and I'm like, oh no, like this is gonna be a Woody Allen movie. Like it's going to be a rom-com in this way. And I have really strong feelings about that. I completely agree with Nicole. I probably have more violent feelings than her about it because she has a sweetness that wasn't in me when I was born and never like nourished in me. And I really like, I hard agreed with it. And it was so cool to have that be a moment that flipped my expectations, while reading it. And it was just like cool and exciting. Like, yeah, it's something that it sucks that like there are things that you feel like you can't talk about as much. I think that's a part of like kind of just like, I don't know, there's a lot of respectability politics stuff that go on in the arts, in the creative industries, and it can limit what you're able to talk on. And I just thought it was like very, very potent. It was cool. I'm like, yeah, I'm jazzed. I'm jazzed that made it in. This is Nicole, solidarity with Nicole, right?
Nicole, without spoiling anything about the end of the movie, it does leave audiences wondering what's going to happen both to these characters as individuals and if there's sort of any future for them as a unit. And I want to sort of, to wrap up, I want to just ask you about what made you want to, as you said at the beginning, have the story of the movie be such a discrete period of time, that you wanted it to be about these two people during this very specific period. Why was that important to you?
I think that we like have grown to conflate forever with happily ever after, and that the things that like a successful connection or a successful relationship goes on and on and on for the rest of our lives. But often that's not true, and that's okay. It's not a failure for a relationship to have a natural end or an imposed end or an accidental end. There is something being impermanent doesn't make it less important or doesn't make it less formative. Sometimes the most formative and important relationships of our lives are impermanent. And part of the bittersweet element to the Matt and Anna love is that they are both helping each other move into the next chapter of their lives where there is no room for the other person. So it's both like it's a gift and a sadness at the same time. But that it's okay. And just because it's sad doesn't mean it's bad. Like I also don't think that sadness negates positivity. I think that like there are sweet sadnesses.
And I think that's a beautiful place for us to wrap things up. Patty and Nicole, thank you all for joining us here for one of the LA Times Talks from the Sundance Film Festival. Again, I'm Mark Olson for the Los Angeles Times. Thanks for watching.